Hi, thanks for joining us online today. I'm Matt, and I will be your host through this type of renewal training. Now, this training we offered last year, and based on a lot of the comments that I received from many of you all seem to enjoy this and want to have this type of training back. So this will be a renewal training for the 2017 year, like you see here. We'll be going over several different things. We got many topics that are very informative to you and your line of work. But the first thing that we want to talk about are the renewal requirements. These are the rules that you're required to follow in order to renew an individual license. So we'll be going over those first. So the first thing are the prerequisites that are involved with the rules. Those prerequisites consist of owing no outstanding fees or fines. So if you still have some fees that you haven't paid for maybe not notifying the local office of starting or not submitting your paperwork in time, those fees will need to be paid before we can renew a license. Secondly, you have to be in compliance with the income tax laws of the state. So pretty soon we'll be receiving that list from the tax commission of who is not in compliance. If you're not in compliance, then we'll have to make sure that you get into compliance first before we can renew. And then lastly, you have to be in compliance with any orders issued by the agency. So if you've got an outstanding notice of non-compliance or received a final order from us, then we'll have to get that settled up first before we can renew a license. Okay? So those are the prerequisites. The requirements that you're required to follow are you have to complete the renewal application, and I'm going to tell you, the renewal applications are going to be dated for December 15th. So those should be received by you. It will have everything on file that we have for you. You need to verify that information, add the fee that's owed, and then send that to the Oklahoma City office. Okay? The next thing is that you also have to pay the annual certification fee. I just talked about including that. So the certification fee will be required. And then lastly, the documentation of the required renewal training. If you're watching the video here today, this will serve as documentation of your renewal training. Otherwise, several have attended conferences throughout the state this year or even attended conferences outside the state. But whatever it is, you'll need to make sure that you document that with us in order to renew your license. So all of this information is due to the Oklahoma City office by January 15th of 2017. Anything comes in after that, we're going to have to tack on a $50 late fee. So make sure you get that to us, and you can submit that either via mail, email, or fax. Okay. So need to make sure we get that in. Lastly, if you have any questions about your license, please contact April Messer here in our Oklahoma City office. She'd be more than happy to help you out. Her information is available right here, so feel free to contact her. Otherwise, stay tuned. We're going to get started with some interesting topics that will help you be able to perform your job better, maybe provide some useful information that you can provide to your customers, and in the end, we end up helping out the environment. Okay?
I've been in business for 14 years, and I'm a septic installer and operation and maintenance specialist. A person doesn't realize how quickly they can become injured and how trivial of a little item that can cause serious damage. So we must be aware on our job all the time with regards to safety.
Hi, Martin.
Hey, good morning, Val.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
How you doing this morning?
Doing great.
Excellent. Excellent.
Looks like we're going to have another busy day today.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear. Martin,
Yeah.
did you see this article about a A guy that died in a septic tank in Renton?
That's the outfit I told you I worked for before starting here. That place was an accident waiting to happen. Old man was more concerned about making money than he was safety. Can't believe something like this didn't happen before.
Well, I'm glad that I'm not the one that had to make the phone call to the family. I can't imagine the pain they're going through.
Right.
You know, it makes the safety program that we're working on super smart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? I vote we grab Chuck and a few of the other guys and have a safety training session.
I like it. You know, I knew there was a reason I hired you.
Of course.
Well, let's go do this.
All right.
Safety is very important to me because I'm a victim of an industrial injury. At one time I was climbing down a ladder, although I had safety gear on. When I released it, the ladder slipped and I was injured very badly.
Hey guys, so you may have heard the story that Val read about in the paper this morning about this guy that got killed in a septic tank over on the east side. And she thought it'd be a good idea if we just went through our confined space entry procedures so that we're kind of up to snuff on what you guys are doing. We're going to start out with the confined space entry permit. That's the beginning of how you evaluate not only the site that you're working in, but also the actual confined space or the tank that you're going to be going down into. So when you look at your form that you have, it goes through and it has some things that it wants you to fill out. Identifies the purpose of the entry, who the crew is, who the supervisors are, how you're going to communicate while you're doing the job, and then goes into looking at all of the individual evaluation that you need to do for personal protective equipment that you need while you are doing the confined space entry itself. So when you look at how you're going to, or what you need to do to protect yourself while you're in the tank, there's a couple of simple approaches to take a look at it. So when you look at what is it on your head that you want to protect, it may be your hearing, maybe your eyes, and you can have a set of goggles. The kind of goggles you use are important. Are you going to be using goggles that will protect you from things splashing back, or do you need to have glasses that will protect you from just impact?
My injury affected me both emotionally and, of course, physically. A person cannot imagine the strain that you have on your life when you cannot provide for your family.
When you're in a tank, a lot of times it's a short height and then there's a lid in there that's made out of concrete. If you stand up too quick or if you move, you can get bunked in the head, and you want to have some kind of protection for the top. You can have a full-on safety helmet, but also in a confined space, an alternative would be just a standard little bump cap. Creation of aerosols when you're in the confined spaces that we work in is an important part of making sure that you have adequate protection for. In particular, because of contaminated tanks, ones that are used that you're doing tank repairs and some of that kind of work on, you're often creating aerosols, and potentially with the mechanical air supply, you want to have some protection against the biological pathogens that are in raw sewage that are in these tanks after you've cleaned them out as best you can. An N95 or an N100 mask is probably the most important piece of PPE that you can use to protect you against inhaling some of these pathogens that are aerosolized inside this tank. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of hand protection that you want to use and the choices that you have, because there's a couple of options. When you're inside of a tank, the first level of protection that you want to have is a nitrile glove that has a minimum grade for protecting you against pathogens. These are gloves like nurses use in doctors' offices. They're examination grade gloves, and so these are the ones that you have available as your base layer. When you're working in rough areas or moving big pieces of equipment or pumps inside of a tank, having a heavier grade glove over the nitrile glove helps protect you even more. A lot of times it's not uncommon for you to get bumped up against the concrete and sharp edges and stuff inside these tanks, and if you get a cut or a scrape or something on your hand, that becomes an entry vector for some of these biological pathogens that are in these tanks.
Once you're hurt, you don't even know if you're really going to truly recover until one day you finally are able to get up. For me, I couldn't walk for a year almost.
Okay, and then when you're in a tank, another piece of protective equipment that you want to think about having available is a Tyvek suit. When you're working in a clean tank, it's less important and your regular work clothes will suffice. But when you're in that contaminated tank, then doing a tank repair or some other kind of work like that, you really want to have some kind of protective outerwear that goes over your clothing. The reason for that is so that when you get out of the tank and you've got contaminated water and liquid on your pants and clothing and everything, you don't transmit that into the cab of your truck, back to the shop, and even in some cases all the way home to your laundry cycle. It's important for you to do as much as you can to protect yourself and your family against the pathogens that you're exposed to. Okay, so now we've talked about all the personal protective equipment that you'll use for your body. Now we need to check the environment that you're going into. And this is the tool that you use. This is an air quality monitor, and you use it two ways. First, you'll use it to check at 3 different levels in the tank. Because some gases are lighter than air, some are heavier than air, you check at the top, the middle, and the bottom. Andy, all right, you got this? So, you're going to check at these 3 levels, and then once you've got that done and you don't have any alarms, then you're clear to start setting up the tripod, get into the harness, and then the next thing you'll do is you'll attach the air quality monitor up here on your collar within about a 6 to 9 inch area of your mouth, because that's where, if you're going to have a problem with gases, it's going to be right here. You want to know about it right away. The next 2 pieces of equipment that we're going to be talking about is the tripod that supports you and while you're going into the tank, and then the harness that you're going to be wearing when you are being lowered, attached to the cable into the confined space. This is a really important part of getting in and out of the tank, particularly if you need to do a non-entry rescue. So before you put these on, every time you use them, inspect this harness, and while it may be dirty, that's okay, but you want to make sure all of the straps aren't frayed and that the equipment is in good shape, physically that way. Another thing you're going to want to do is to inspect the cable so that you make sure that there aren't any kinks or any frays in it. A real easy way to do that is if you run your hand up the cable, if there's a loose end on it, it's going to stab you in the hand. An important part of setting up the tripod is making sure that the feet are wide enough that you've got a good solid base, and also that they're wide enough so that when you're hanging and suspended in the middle of this over the hole of the tank that you're going to go into, that you're able to go into the space without banging up against any of the equipment. It's important for that also because somebody may have to yard you out of the hole, and you don't want to have to make it harder for them than it is. Another important piece of setting this up is that this cable runs up over the top of the tripod in wheels. The main thing you want to look for are these pins that are inserted up on top that are the keepers, that are retention pins to hold the cable in place so it doesn't travel out of the track that it's in. You getting this?
Oh yeah.
All right. Okay. After you've got the tripod set up and the legs extended to the proper distances, the next step is to attach the winch to the leg of the tripod. With these clips here, you enter these pins into these holes at the elevation that you want, and then loop these over, and then this is secure. This then goes on up to the pulley at the top, and the cable then continues on through and is connected to the harness in the middle. To lower it, you just crank the handle. To raise it, you just take it back the other way. Okay, so we've talked about personal protective equipment for your body. We've talked about the equipment that's going to keep you safe, taking you in and out of the tank. We've talked about the air quality monitoring for checking for gases and oxygen levels inside the tank. The next thing we want to do is talk about air supply while you're in there. What this unit does is it's an air blower, and you put it on one of the entry points in the tank. Tanks are configured differently, so you'll have to figure out and decide which is the best place to put air into the tank, but it should be, if it's a compartment that is separated from another compartment in the tank, the compartment that you're working in. So you want the air to be basically blowing into the same space that you're in the confined space, in the tank. Another important piece to this is the volume of air that these are able to produce. If you have a tank that is large, you need to be able to turn the air over a minimum of 5 times. This needs to have a volume throughput of cubic feet per minute that will accomplish that in the tank. It's really important to make sure that you match the blower that you have with the tank size that you have. Okay guys, that's it. Check your job sheets for the equipment that you need. Make sure you've got everything to keep you safe, and have a good day.
Everybody, thank you so much for taking the time to go through this. This is really important stuff.
Hey guys, pay close attention to these things. These things will save your lives.
That's right.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, let's go. I think that went really well. Except for Andy. Did you see him? He spent more time fiddling with his phone than he did listening.
Yeah, I saw that too. I vote we call him in. These guys have got to know how to do this thing right, Val.
My brother-in-law is a pilot, and he says that they practice safety and response all the time. That way, if something goes wrong, people aren't in a panic and they know what to do.
Well, I vote we drop kick anyone who cannot be trusted to save their own life.
Well, that's something I can vote on.
All right.
Andy, to the front office, please. Andy, office. All right, so how are we doing with
The number one consideration in safety for me is peace of mind, both peace of mind for myself and for my employees. With regards to safety, money shouldn't be a consideration, because what you save by your safety meetings saves money in the long run, both in employee safety and employee health.
Okay, so this section we're going to talk about ethics. And the question may not necessarily be why talk about ethics, but why not talk about ethics? Because to gain credibility, personal respect, and admiration from others, we should not just follow the laws, we also have to work within ethical standards. And to be frank, I've received several comments from different individuals throughout the different programs criticizing others within their own field, whether it's somebody they feel is cutting corners or not doing the job that they're supposed to do, or somebody is offering a service that may not necessarily be best for the homeowner and feel wrong by that somehow. So maybe it's time we do discuss ethics and what ethics means. So we've looked through some literature and found some references that we use to create this ethics module. So to talk about ethics, first thing you have to understand is that we represent the state when we deal with our stakeholders. It's not just DEQ employees that represent the state, but anybody to whom we issue a license also represents the state. We issue that license to license individuals to follow the rules for the on-site program. So that's what a license does. So then the last part of this sentence has to deal with our stakeholders. So you have to understand who the stakeholders are. So when we think about the on-site program and who we represent, who are the stakeholders that we deal with on a day-to-day basis? Well, one is our clients, and that's going to be the citizens of Oklahoma. Those are the individuals that pay taxes, so we have an on-site program. And then the second stakeholder is the environment. We're in the business of protecting the environment while addressing the needs of those clients, of the citizens. So those are two important things to remember. Our clients are the citizens, and the environment is that which we are protecting. So what do ethics do? Ethics address the moral duties and obligations that we have in society. These are the things that we determine to be acceptable behavior, or what's right and wrong. These are all defined within ethics with the goal of achieving the maximum good for all people, not just for one person or one particular group or one particular program. The whole goal is to achieve the maximum good for all people. And ultimately, we make decisions every day that build or weaken credibility, personal respect, and admiration for others. It's hard to believe that just one little choice or one little decision that is made can affect each and every one of these things. So let's talk about the difference between ethics and law. Okay, so law includes punishment for offenders as part of a judicial process. Obviously, there is punishment for breaking a law, and there are people in place to uphold that law and to prosecute that law. Ethics, on the other hand, is a little bit different. Ethics do not include an objective review of one's actions or any type of structured punishment procedure. Ethics are based on what's the maximum good for all. And even though that it's less structured and less formal than laws, ethics influence our lives as much or perhaps even more than laws. So those individual choices or those individual decisions that we make each and every day ultimately can influence how we act or how we deal with things even more than complying with the law does. So let's talk about ethics and individuals within industries. So the actions of individuals performing services within an industry ultimately determine public perception of that industry. That makes sense. The integrity of each person is important because the actions of a single person can affect the long-term viability of an industry. And that's very true. There's been some recent cases where maybe leaders of a particular corporation or something has come out in the press as being considered crooked or somebody that hasn't been doing the right thing. Well, the public perception is that that particular corporation or that industry ultimately they don't hold the public's perception very high at all. Maybe they consider that industry to be corrupt. So it's important at the end of each day to know that each and everything that I do, I've done in the best interest of not only my clients, my stakeholders, but for my industry in general. So let's look at how ethics and society are considered to be kind of in a terrible state. So the Barna Group performed a survey. They surveyed the general public and asked them whether or not they considered these leaders to hold their complete confidence. And these are the results. And you can see that there's not very many there that are held in the public's complete confidence. Teachers, they're not even, they're the highest on this list, but they're not even considered very many to hold the public's complete confidence. So that tells us something. That tells us that ethics are in a terrible state. So the next question would be, why are ethics in such a terrible state? So the first reason that ethics are in a terrible state is because ultimately people are going to pursue what's convenient for them. They're not going to think about other people at all. It's only what they want to do. And oftentimes we choose the path of least resistance, and in doing so, we could cut corners in doing our jobs. That's so true for so many different programs. You know, maybe if I don't follow this one little part of this rule, that's going to make this job a little bit easier. So I'm not going to worry about it. Well, that's why ethics can be considered in such a terrible state. Sometimes we give ourselves permission to cut corners because we rationalize that it's just a one-time issue, and the goal or the purpose justifies our cutting corners. You know, maybe I'm not going to incorporate some health and safety procedures for my business because, you know, it's not always going to happen. It might just happen once, and the likelihood of something bad happening is not very high. So, you know, I may not do that. So I'm giving myself permission to cut that corner because in my mind I'm saying it's only going to be a one-time deal. Secondly, ethics are in a terrible state because ultimately people do what they must in order to win. Most people hate losing. Nobody wants to come out as second best, or nobody wants to lose out on getting a big job or anything like that. Few people start out with the desire to be unethical, but even fewer people start out with the mindset that it's all right to lose. I think when you talk about sacrificing how something makes you feel, whether or not you feel good at the end of the day, can really affect whether or not you're going to be an ethical person. So those are a couple things there to remember. Third, ethics are in a terrible state because we rationalize choices with relativism. In no-win situations, people decide what's right according to, or what's relative to, their circumstance or standards. Okay? So people decide that according to how they feel, this is what's best for them. That's what relative means. Each person has their own relativity, so to speak, or relativism. The problem with this is that everyone has their own standard, and this changes with time and maybe with the situation. Ultimately, one day how you feel about something, the next day you may feel totally different, and that's relative to each person. So this chosen course of action may not be for the maximum good of all. If it's always changing, how can you ever have any sort of consistent standard there? So how do we deal with it? How do we deal with an ethical dilemma? How do we get the state of ethics back into a good state? Okay, so let's talk about using the one rule for everyone. You've often heard this as the golden rule. And what the golden rule does is it allows you to achieve a maximum good for all. So let's look at the golden rule. The golden rule cuts across cultural, religious, and social boundaries. And most people refer to this golden rule as do unto others as you would do unto yourself. Okay? Treat one person the same as you would treat yourself. And this cuts across all those cultural and religious and social boundaries. If you look at different types of religions, they all have this one verse or this one tenet or this one standard that talks about treating people the way you want to be treated. And so I think that's important. If you have this one standard that can cut across all of those things that everybody can agree to, secondly, it becomes easy to understand. You don't need to study the law to know how you want to be treated. All you simply do is imagine yourself in place of another person. And there's no complicated rules or loopholes associated with that. So then that brings up the next challenge. How do we translate the golden rule into dealing with environmental ethical dilemma or situations that are difficult within our on-site sewage program? How do we translate the golden rule? So first thing we have to do is remember who the target is. Our actions should be for the maximum good of the environment. So why not apply that golden rule philosophy in how we make decisions that affect the environment? So it will allow us to replace a few words here with environment. So whatever you want the environment to do to you, do also to the environment. Hurt not the environment with that which pains yourself. So there are many things that we can do to help satisfy ethical standards for this industry. We can feel better about ourselves and about our customers and about the environment at the end of the day. So the key point here is that we cannot really separate people, the client, from environment, the client. Ultimately, they're both our stakeholders. If we're going to be ethical people and understand who those stakeholders are, our clients and the environment are the same. So we apply the golden rule for both. So that way, in all these little decisions that we make, whether or not I'm going to complain about my competitor, or whether or not I'm going to criticize a particular new technology that's been introduced that's a fix-all for everyone, let's think about it in the long term and with an ethical standard of how is this going to affect the environment.
So thank you for watching those videos. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you got some information out of them. If you have any comments or if you have any questions about it, feel free to contact me. My information is going to be right up here. If you've got some suggestions on how we could offer a different type of training, I would love to know that as well.
So as far as documenting your viewing of this renewal video, let's talk about that. So on your renewal application, there will be a line there that has a place for you to provide the documentation. And on that line, I want you to put a documentation code word or a password, okay? So what that password is this right here, 2017 renewal. That is the word that you will place on your renewal application to show that you actually watched this video and can document that you watched it. So there it is, 2017 renewal. Put that on the application, send it in to us, and then we can make sure that we get your application processed and a license issued for the next year. Thank you for your time, and we hope to see you soon.